Hey, welcome back, folks. This is the Ray Lucia Show. Remember, emails coming up in just a bit. RayLucia.com, RayLucia.com. If you have a pressing money type question, then I'm ready to take those calls. 877-752-6637. It's time for the lesson plan for the day. Another teaching moment right here on the Ray Lucia Show as we bring on my special guest, Brandon Cox, who is an expert in oil and gas. Brandon Cox, of course, is the CEO of Pipeline Oil and Gas. See, now I've got the music in the background, Brandon, because this song, Think for Yourself, one of the great George Harrison songs, actually, from way back, way before you were even born. But in either event, Brandon joins me, and this is really important stuff because we were just talking about, turnkey investments, income investments. And as I've stated many times on this show, if I'm not an expert, I don't want to talk about something with expertise unless I have someone that is. So this happens to be your business. So help us, let's start at the beginning. And you talk to the folks out here about oil and gas investments, because the first thing that most people think of is risk. I don't want to lose my money, and I certainly don't want to lose all my money. Thanks for joining me.
You bet, Ray. Thanks for letting me be here today. Yeah, I think the traditional sense or the traditional thoughts when you talk about oil and gas is it's right up there with the roulette table over in Vegas. And if you're not educated and you're not informed, it completely makes sense on why that's the case. So once you start digging into the weeds a little bit and diving down and getting into the particulars, you realize that not all oil companies or oil projects are created the same. There's a vast difference across the spectrum. So everybody's situation and resources are different based on where they're at, their earning situation. So you got to start figuring out who you can trust in an industry that has been plagued with sharks and people that want to take advantage of the novice. Because how else do you get involved in something that is 1, 2, 3, 4 miles into the ground, and you're talking with geologists, you're talking about, on the financial side, you've got everything under the umbrella that you can think of that applies to the oil and gas field. So risk is one of those things you just have to be okay with, but I think sophisticated people really understand that it's mitigated and it's calculated to the best of your ability. And so that's why when we look at projects, we're not wildcatting, because you just have to be...
Well, that's where the whole dry hole thing comes in. So what I think most people are afraid of is they've heard those stories in the past about somebody in Oklahoma or whatever, and they were going to get rich quick, and they gave them a bunch of their money, and they drilled 3 or 4 or 5 holes, and they came up empty, and people lost 100% of their dough. So that's wildcatting. That's just drilling a hole and hoping that you strike oil, and if you do, you can become wealthy beyond imagination. If you like the Clampetts.
Right.
If you don't, then you could lose all your money. What you're dealing in are more developmental wells. Explain what that is.
Well, you're talking about wells that basically have existing production. So regardless of what you do to further improve the project, that existing production of oil and gas that's coming out of the ground is going to create that monthly income for you, still give you the opportunity to take advantage of some of those significant tax advantages. But then once you have that safety net put in place, now you can go out with today's technology that didn't exist 5 years ago. That's how recent the oil and gas game has changed, and that's why we have a global oil boom going on, but especially right here in the United States. That technology allows you to identify and exploit certain resources that they couldn't 5 years ago. And by obviously with the advancement in technology, it makes it much more of a predictable outcome as you go in and you ramp up these projects and you take them to the next level, because you have some phenomenal commodity prices when you're talking about a barrel of oil. When it costs you 30 to 35 bucks a barrel to get to the surface, and you're selling it for 105 bucks a barrel, that's a pretty good rate of return. And those pump jacks are going up and down 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that's where you're not really having to get out of bed and work.
All right, so I want to talk about this because I've done a lot of reading on this subject, and I don't know how in the world, with all this fracking technology, hey, you've got the environmentalists out there that hate your guts, But besides that, you also have the expense associated with fracking. So how can you pull oil out of the ground for 35 and everybody else is spending 75?
Well, it's based on what region of the country that you're in. We focus primarily in Louisiana, the Gulf Coast. We're onshore.
Is that where that accent comes from?
I'm originally from Kansas, and even from Kansas, people think I have an accent. So I couldn't tell you where the accent comes from. It's borderline Texas, Louisiana, Midwest, all blended together. But the Gulf Coast region is really special and unique. Maybe one of the only places in the whole planet where you have natural porosity within the rocks and the sandy formations in the Gulf Coast region where that oil flows naturally to the surface. So fracking and horizontal drilling, all of those increased what I call risk and logistics to get the oil out of the ground, those don't apply down in Louisiana, and you're not dealing with Arctic type weather conditions like they are up in North Dakota where you got equipment and everything breaking because the high for the day is negative 30 degrees. Louisiana, we get this thing called rain down there, but we're built to play in that type of arena, so it doesn't really slow us down.
All right, 877-PLANNER if you happen to have a question for Brandon Cox. We're talking oil and gas. It's a teaching moment here on the Ray Lucia Show as we all learn together about an alternative investment. Now, Brandon, I was just speaking about having a turnkey solution for retirees. So how do you get around, number one, convincing a retiree or someone, my age, I'm not quite retired, but I'm semi-retired. How do you convince me, number one, my money is relatively safe, and number two, that the income check isn't going to stop because obviously oil is a depleting asset, and I want to get that income check, and I want to get it for a long, long, long time to come. Convince me.
No doubt about it, there's risk in the oil and gas field, but again, it's what level of risk are you willing to look at? These projects that are down there already producing, very safe in a sense that once a well is on, it has the ability, based on the formation, to produce for 10, 15, 20, 40, 50 years just in one zone. So if you're looking at those types of projects and you're looking at the price of commodities, the risk is very, very manageable in those types of scenarios. Again, it's based on the project and the formations that you're dealing with that determine the longevity of that monthly income that's coming in.
All right, we only have a minute left, so I want to cover the tax benefits because there's this thing called a depletion allowance. You got 30 seconds. Go.
Intangible drilling costs. What most folks don't understand is that up to 85% of your investment can be written off the very first year. That's phenomenal. There's nothing else out there that has those types of benefits, but the IRS tax code is set up to favor those who are willing to take the risk and go out and do domestic development so we can reduce our dependency.
So what kind of a distribution would be traditional? And I don't want to say yield because there's a difference between distribution and yield. But what kind of a distribution? You got 5 seconds.
Well, I mean, as far as distribution with the taxes, you can fully write the thing off within 7 years. But 85% of that's coming the very first year to somebody.
Okay, we're going to have more lesson plans on this particular subject so we can all learn together. I want to thank Brandon Cox from Pipeline Oil and Gas. He is the CEO. And thank you for joining us. We'll have you on again.
Thanks, Ray.
Don't go away, folks. It's the Ray Lucia Show.
The Ray Lucia Show.